Some things we're going to share tonight. We're going to talk about colors. We're going to talk about types of paint. We're going to talk about some of the things that I've learned and shared with Quentin.
I've learned secondhand.
Some things that we've learned, some tips, some tricks, some tools to use. We're going to be talking about that. So if you ever have questions, make sure to comment and ask. And if you've ever done this before, if you've ever done a cabinet makeover, if you've ever painted cabinets, love to hear your input as well. So let's get to it. I guess before I get into the color, I guess I should talk about the types of paint first, because the original plan was to do chalk paint on the cabinets, and I picked out the color based on that. So before I picked out the color, I looked at different places to get chalk paint. So I looked at the Hobby Lobby chalk paint. I looked at Michael's. I looked at like every brand of chalk paint out there. I did want to be able to go and get it and not order it off of somewhere. I don't want to order a color off of online because I can't really see what that was.
Because when you get it at a store, typically you can get like a sample size and give it a look and kind of test it out. And if you get to the house and all of a sudden that color isn't quite the same.
Yeah. So it was a long process. So I picked it out as Silos District by Magnolia Home. Okay, I have to tell you a secret. I'm not a Chip and Joanne fan. I mean, I don't dislike them, but I've never seen a single episode of Fixer Upper, right? Fixer Upper? Yeah, anyway. So I'm not a hater, but I'm also not like, oh my gosh, Chip and Joanne did it, so do I. But after deciding, okay, I want to go in the blue family and looking at many photos and ideas of what I wanted to do, they had the color. So that's what I was... That's
the most important part. It's not necessarily the brand, it's the tool and if they have what you need.
Yeah. So, Ace Hardware carries it. You can also buy it directly from Magnolia Home or from Target as well. However, Ace is the only place locally that you can go that can tint it for you. Not all Aces carry Magnolia Home, and not all Aces carry the chalk paint. So they do have the chalk paint, but they did not have the correct base of the chalk paint. So they weren't able to make this color in the chalk paint at the time. I would have had to wait a week.
Didn't want to wait a week.
I didn't want to wait a week, mainly because...
We already took the cabinets off.
This is where my door cabinets were off. And by the way, this is where my microwave would usually be. And because we're getting a new microwave that's being installed tomorrow... I wanted to go ahead and get the painting done, so I didn't want to wait. Long story short, after a lot of research and made the decision to go ahead and go with a latex-based paint and sand the cabinets, because with chalk paint, you don't have to sand.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. You may not have to sand, but all the work is on the back end of it.
Yeah.
Whereas with the latex, all the work is at the beginning. Then once you paint, you're done.
Yeah.
Because it's fun. Sanding's fun.
Because I Googled how to sand faster because it was taking so long. The best advice I got was put in the earplugs and listen to music. That was the best advice, because really you can't rush it. You just need to do a good job. So
She got a lot done listening to Slayer though. You got it done really quick.
I was using a palm sander, and then we went and got the circular sander, which worked amazingly better, but I still needed to use the palm sander to get into the corners, and even some things I still just did by hand. But
that helps get to the smaller spaces. That helps
get to that. So the trick is starting off with a quick 80 to 100 grit to just get most of the varnish off, or paint if you had it, and previous paint, and then going into a finer grit between 150 or 180. So I think I did most at 150. So the grit is key. So sanded, great, awesome, and then just make sure clean. I don't have it with me right now. Stall. Tack cloth is your best friend, okay? First, I wiped down everything with just spray bottle of water and a rag, and then went back over everything with a tack cloth. best friend gets up all your little grits and grimes and everything that's settled with the dusting. Also a vacuum to start with. So just make sure you thoroughly clean before painting. So the biggest key to this is patience. Seriously, don't try to do this project too quickly. It's not going to work.
I think we planned on having it done on Saturday. Some people laughed like that and said, well, good luck.
Good luck.
We're like, oh yeah, we got a plan.
Yeah. Oh no, we have a plan. Yeah. The other thing I Googled, and man, Google was amazing to help me with this project. Floetrol.
You were saying Floetrol.
Floetrol.
My flood.
So what Floetrol does is it increases the drying time for your paint. So by increasing the drying time on the paint, it's going to lay flatter. So that's going to decrease your brush strokes on the paint. This quart of a bottle is about $6. Find it at Home Depot. You find it probably anywhere, but we got ours at Home Depot. Instructions say to add about 8 ounces of it into a gallon of paint, a gallon of latex paint. I only added 4 ounces, which just based on a lot of people's comments who have used it wanted to do that. So I figured let me just start with 4 ounces to make sure that I don't overdo it. Another thing I tested out on the inside of the cabinet doors, I didn't know because I'd read so much stuff. You know, there's so much information out there. What do you do, right? Yeah. One thing I had read was to use a stripping gel to help with removing the varnish. That much. So
it's about that much.
About that much. Didn't really help for what I had to do. So okay, so let's get into like some really good things that we learned. In your budget, don't just plan for the cost of your materials and everything. Budget for eating out, because your kitchen is going to be out of commission. Like anyway, and you can only eat so many sandwiches.
Yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah, so we went and got food quite a bit, but also when you are eating, plan to have things out of commission. So plan to have paper plates and plasticware and all that stuff.
2-day-old coffee cups.
Is this worth paying somebody else to do?
Depends. I think for us and where we're at right now, I don't think it necessarily is. But if this cabinet area was any bigger, I don't know if I...
So here are some things to consider when if you're thinking about redoing your cabinets and you don't know if you should do it yourself or if you should hire somebody. First of all, I think we're both firm believers in you get what you pay for. Good professionals are worth every single penny that you pay. So, having said that, I would expect something like this for a good professional, probably $1,500.
Depends. I think it just depends on what you're needing to do and what kind of how much work it takes.
Right.
I mean it's going to be expensive just because they're as much time as it took us. Even though they're professionals, it's still going to take them quite a bit of time. What we had, it'd probably take at least a day. Probably a day and a half to 2 days just to make sure everything was done right, put back in order.
When you're budgeting, it's not a matter of, for me, like how good of a deal can I find? My main thing is, can I find the right person who's going to do a good job? And obviously I don't want to be ripped off, but I know it's going to cost something. And so if you absolutely don't have the time or the skill and know-how, don't do it. Hire somebody to do this for you.
Let me ask you, would you do this again?
Yeah, I would. If I had the time and if it wasn't a ridiculous amount of cabinets, I would do this again because...
Would you be doing it in a place that you live currently?
Yeah.
You would do it again at another place? You would live in the dust and all that stuff
again? Yeah, because I would.
Okay.
I would. Because obviously now I feel way more proficient at it because I've done it, but I would. It wasn't awful. It was just very time consuming, and you have to be patient. You have to be willing to do the tedious little details like wiping up dust and making sure everything is constantly, I mean, every time I did a pass of sanding, it was wiping dust, tack cloth everywhere. So a whole lot of this going on, okay? So I would. But yeah, if you don't think you can do it, then don't do it because it's going to turn out crappy. So speaking, Autumn brought up YouTube, and quite frankly, there was, I think I read more articles than I actually watched videos. And I say this only because there were so many videos out there that I feel like were not super helpful, or they just,
that seems to kind of be the problem. I'd say with a lot of the stuff on YouTube, it's like you really have to, I mean, with everything, you kind of have to weed out the trash and weed out the garbage, because I mean, now since, you know, the Chip and Joanna Gaines and all the whoever else is that are on the HGTV reality TV, that it's not, since they make it look cool and they make it look fun, they make it look easy, people try to do it and then they think they know how to do it, so then they try to do their own videos, which it's not.
All these people in their videos.
Ugh. But no, I think it just depends. You just have to weed through. I mean, we're not trying to tell you how to do it. Because, I mean,
we're not painters, but we just did this. So.
We're not painters. We're not, you know, contractors. This is not our thing. We're not carpenters or any of that stuff. We're just trying to figure out what we tried to make work. Yeah.
Take your time. Don't get in a rush. So, and if you, for me, it was a lot of just, okay, I need to walk away from this right now, especially during the sanding part, because I physically couldn't.
Covered in sand all over your face.
Covered in sand. At one point, I looked at my face in the bathroom. I was like, oh, my foundation looks really great. I'm like, oh, that's varnish dust on my face. So, but that is, it's just the most important thing. Time. Make sure you're putting the time into your work and you're being patient. This is not a job that can be rushed. Even now that we've got the boxes done, like I'm going back and noticing like maybe a few like little drips that dried. So I'll go back and sand and touch those spots up. If you have any questions about this process, seriously, reach out to me if you're thinking about doing this and I can help you get started.